Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are jumping into a stack of source material that really documents the final stage of a political metamorphosis. I mean, we're talking about the fundamental transformation of American conservatism as it stands right now in late 2025.
Yeah, and our mission here is to get past the day-to-day headlines.
Exactly. To understand the deep structural changes happening in Washington and, maybe more importantly, the new ideological core that's driving all of it.
Well, and what we're analyzing, it's so much more than just a policy shift. We are looking at a deep and I think potentially durable realignment. The sources really break it down into two interlocking concepts.
Okay, what are they?
First, you have the Systemic Implementation Blueprint, which is Project 2025. That's the how. And second, you have the ideological engine driving that process, National Conservatism or NetCon. That's the why.
And when you put all these reports together, the consensus seems to be that the political reality we're seeing today, it just bears minimal resemblance to, the party of Ronald Reagan.
It's a whole different animal. This is a new institutionalized governing philosophy.
So let's establish the central thesis for you right now. Project 2025 is the administrative tool designed to execute the NatCon philosophy. Let's unpack the structural changes first.
Agreed. We have to start with Project 2025, which, is formally called the Presidential Transition Project. It was developed mostly by the Heritage Foundation starting way back in 2022.
And the scale of it is what's really striking.
Oh, the scale is remarkable. It's less a transition memo and more a parallel government blueprint, really. And it was constructed over years.
And this mechanism, this parallel government, it's built on four interconnected pillars, right? Yeah. Can you walk us through the sheer scale of this operation?
It is exhaustive. I mean, first you have the policy recommendations in this massive 920-page document, the Mandate for Leadership.
Yeah.
Then there's a ready-made personnel database designed to staff thousands of positions. Third, the Presidential Administration Academy, which is basically a training school for new appointees.
Training school.
And finally, a confidential implementation playbook that dictates the whole sequence of actions. And we're talking about over 100 partner organizations contributing to this. That level of planning, it just goes way beyond a typical transition team.
That organizational scale is huge.
Yeah.
But the critical mechanism, the thing designed to make it all stick, is the administrative restructuring that started on day one.
That's the administrative revolution. On January 20th, 2025, the president signed Executive Order 14171, and that reinstated the controversial Schedule F.
Which they've now rebranded, a bit confusingly, as Schedule Policy Career.
Exactly.
So for you listening who may not follow the arcane details of federal employment law, what does reviving Schedule F actually do? Why is it so revolutionary?
Well, Schedule F surgically targets the protected civil service. It reclassifies federal employees in positions that are deemed policy influencing. And that's a potentially enormous group.
Right. From
their protected status, which gives them due process and job security, to being at-will employees.
And the consequence of that is immediate.
It's immediate and it's profound. At will means they can be dismissed without cause, without the usual protections. Due process means competence trumps politics. At will means political alignment suddenly becomes the key to your job security.
So this is basically the most significant change to the civil service since 1883.
It fundamentally erodes the merit system, yes.
So what has the scale of this reclassification been so far?
The sources are indicating that by April 2025, the Office of Personnel Management had already reclassified about 50,000 positions. But here's the thing. Depending on how broadly policy influencing is interpreted, legal scholars are warning that number could easily climb into the hundreds of thousands.
And the administration's stated goal is huge.
It's revolutionary. To shrink the federal workforce by about 300,000 employees, a massive 10% reduction through resignations, buyouts, and layoffs, in 2025 alone.
It's worth pausing on that. I mean, the sheer bureaucratic scale of reducing the federal workforce by 10% in 1 year. The stated goal is accountability. But critics say the result is just the fundamental politicization of the government's permanent machinery.
And what's crucial is how they did it. They just bypassed the standard rulemaking process, the Administrative Procedure Act, by claiming constitutional authority.
Which means no public notice, no comment, period.
Exactly. That procedural shortcut is the core of the legal controversy. They're arguing the president has inherent constitutional authority to manage the executive branch, and that this nullifies past protective laws. It signals a radical willingness to challenge checks and balances.
And it's why the lawsuits started flowing immediately.
From day two, federal employee unions were filing suits.
And the personnel choices just underscore the intent here. Despite campaign denials, the architects of Project 2025 are now holding the levers of government. Can you give us a clear example of that connection?
The clearest is probably Russell Vought. He literally wrote the executive office chapter of Project 2025. And now, he's the director of the Office of Management and Budget.
And he's been very open about it.
Very. He stated the goal was to, and I'm quoting here, destroy the administrative state and fire and traumatize federal workers.
That quote certainly underscores the intent.
Oh, yeah.
And we see similar alignment in policy. Stephen Miller's America First Legal, for instance, helped craft the blueprint for expanding executive power.
And that translates directly into these aggressive immigration crackdowns. I mean, if you look at the broader policy landscape, the implementation is systematic. It aligns perfectly with the Project 2025 recommendations.
Mass deportations, dismantling asylum.
Ending birthright citizenship, those are primary focuses. And on gender policy, the Gender Policy Council was gone immediately. And there's been a systematic removal of references to gender equality or diversity, equity, and inclusion. It just shows P2025 as the tool executing the NatCon cultural agenda.
Now, despite this systematic implementation, the sources do note the legal system is pushing back.
It is. Lawsuits began almost immediately, and we saw a federal judge in late October even bar the administration from firing federal employees during a government shutdown. This is a critical battle over the rule of law.
It is, and that tension between the judiciary and the executive brings us right to the second, deeper change.
Yeah.
The ideological shift that's motivating all these structural moves.
Right.
So let's pivot to that ideological core. National conservatism, or NatCon, the old Republican foundation, the three-legged stool. Fiscal conservatism, social traditionalism, and foreign policy hawks. Where does NatCon break from that?
Fundamentally, NatCon rejects the idea that conservatism has to adhere to classical liberal tenets, prioritizing individual liberty and free markets above all else. The first major break is economic policy.
They've abandoned free trade?
Completely abandoned it for aggressive economic protectionism.
When you say aggressive economic protectionism, I mean supporting unions, protecting gig workers, using state power to rebuild manufacturing. That sounds a lot closer to the historical interventionism of the left than to Reagan's free market ideals.
Yeah. Precisely. The sources describe this approach as closer to Franklin D. Roosevelt's New Deal than to Reaganomics. And what's crucial here, for you to understand, is why this is happening. NatCon sees the globalist, financialized economy as having hollowed out the American working class.
So the state has to step in.
They believe the state must actively intervene with tariffs, industrial policy, market regulation to protect and empower the domestic worker. It's a philosophy centered on national strength and populist appeal.
Which leads right to the second philosophical break, which is on social policy. Classical conservatism wanted minimal government interference. NatCon wants something different.
They reject maximizing individual freedom. Instead, they believe in a common good defined by traditional values, and they actively assert that politics should be used to guide citizens toward correct choices.
So it's not minimizing state power, it's wielding it.
Wielding it to shape culture and society. The goal isn't just cultural defense, it's cultural offense using political power.
And the third break is the integration of religion into public life.
Absolutely. They advocate for religion, often citing Catholic social teaching, to play a much more central role in politics. Traditional conservatives wanted to change the culture so politics would follow. National conservatives believe they have to seize political power now to reshape society.
The cultural war has to be won in the halls of government.
That's the argument.
And the political face of this whole intellectual shift is clearly Vice President J.D. Vance. He's described as the movement's most prominent political figure, the intellectual leader of this post-liberal right.
Vance really embodies the priorities. He champions industrial policy, he's skeptical of overseas military commitments, and he advocates using state power for conservative social goals. His influences are this fascinating mix.
Yeah.
From Silicon Valley figures like Peter Thiel to thinkers like Patrick Deneen and the neo-reactionary writer Curtis Yarvin.
And he has that quote, right? The kingdom of God must be defended like any other kingdom.
Which is a very clear articulation of the idea that cultural values require active, aggressive political protection.
So, if NatCon's core economic policy involves breaking up monopolies and protecting unions, where does that leave the traditional Republican funding base, the ones who love deregulation and global finance? Is this coalition durable?
That is the central contradiction that will test this movement. But the institutions are building serious durability around this tension. It's not just Vance's personal
And
ideas.
it being formalized.
Exactly. The Edmund Burke Foundation, the annual NatCon conferences, like the one in Washington this past July, and aligned think tanks like Claremont have built the intellectual infrastructure.
And the fact that key figures, like Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, were speaking at the conference in September, that signals this is now fully integrated into the highest levels of the administration.
It does.
This brings us to the volatile political climate of late 2025, affected by one specific act of violence.
We have to address the tragic assassination of Charlie Kirk, the 31-year-old leader of Turning Point USA. On September 10th, Kirk was fatally shot in the neck by Tyler James Robinson during an outdoor debate at Utah Valley University.
And the suspect was charged with aggravated murder, with prosecutors citing political motivation. The political impact was immediate. It served as a political accelerator for the movement. What did the data show?
The reaction was just visceral. A poll taken right after showed Republican voter sentiment that the country was headed in the right direction. It just plummeted from 70% in June down to 49%. It was a shocking event that reinforced this narrative of an existential cultural war.
And it followed other incidents, like the shootings of Minnesota legislators in June.
Right, so it placed Kirk's death within a broader pattern of escalating political violence.
This feeds directly into a really disturbing analytical concept described in the sources as mirrored radicalization.
This is the critical insight. While the right emphasizes the violence directed at its leaders, the data suggests that extreme tactics and rhetoric are escalating dangerously on both sides.
Both sides.
Yes. A report from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, CSIS, found that 2025 was on pace to be the left's most violent year in more than 3 decades. And for the first time in over 30 years in their data set, incidents linked to the far left actually outnumbered those linked to the far right.
So, mirrored radicalization. Where one side's escalation justifies the other extremism, it's a self-reinforcing and profoundly dangerous cycle.
And rather than diminishing the movement's energy, this tragedy seems to have validated their persecution narrative, accelerating the whole transition to a governing philosophy.
Right, so the upcoming America Fest 2025 in December has now become both a memorial and a gathering that validates their capture of federal power.
Exactly. They're turning grievance into a justification for wielding power. The movement has institutionalized itself.
Okay, let's expand our view to the global implications. How does this national conservative ascendance challenge the post-1945 liberal international order?
It's a conceptual rejection of it. I mean, that post-war order relied on America acting as a security guarantor, underwriting collective security, advocating for rules-based trade.
The MatCon approach is different.
It's transactional and staunchly America first. They view NATO not as this indispensable alliance based on shared values, but purely as a cost-sharing arrangement that needs to be recalculated. The sources call it selective engagement.
Replacing deep global commitment with conditional partnership. And this shift isn't just in the U.S., it's emboldening similar movements around the world.
Absolutely. Nationalist parties in Europe, in Hungary, and Italy, they view the American shift as validating their own sovereignty-first approach. It creates an international network of nationalist movements that reject the authority of bodies like the UN or the EU.
Okay, let's bring it back home and talk about the constitutional risks here. If Schedule F is the key mechanism, how does it challenge the judiciary and Congress?
Well, Schedule F, combined with the broader administrative reforms, it concentrates immense, really unprecedented power in the executive branch. It challenges Congress, which created the merit system a century ago, and it challenges the judiciary, which has to rule on the executive's reach.
And that legal theory, claiming constitutional authority to bypass the Administrative Procedure Act, is designed to just dramatically expand presidential power.
Right. The argument is that the president is supreme in managing the executive apparatus, and Vice President Vance's open critique of judges who rule against executive actions. That signals a broader comfort with challenging democratic norms.
If the judicial branch gets in the way.
It signals that the NatCon philosophy sees judicial intervention as an obstacle to be overcome, not a check to be respected.
So what does this all mean for the movement's long-term durability? The sources seem to identify one central test that's divorced from ideology: economic sustainability.
And this raises the single most important question. Can this ideological transformation deliver tangible results for its working class base? The sources note that despite claims of actively engineering lower inflation, the rate in September 2025 stood at 3.0% year on year.
The exact level they inherited.
The exact level. And many economists argue the aggressive use of extensive tariffs, a key NatCom tool, is actually contributing to that persistent inflationary pressure.
So the goals of reviving manufacturing remain mixed, and these persistent affordability challenges, especially if tariffs raise the cost of goods, could be a real vulnerability.
It's a major risk because the coalition also faces deep internal tensions. You have the Silicon Valley tech figures like Peter Thiel versus traditional business interests who hate tariffs and regulation. You have populist economics versus the donor class's preference for low taxes.
And foreign policy tensions.
Huge foreign policy tensions, like the movement's general isolationism clashing with strong support for Israel. We saw that with Vance's condemnation of Israeli settlement expansion in the West Bank back in October. These are significant fault lines.
So to summarize for you, the listener, the shift from Reaganism to national conservatism appears to be a durable realignment. It's been executed on two tracks. It's structurally embedded through Project 2025, especially Schedule F, and it's intellectually supported by a vast new institutional infrastructure.
And critically, the intense political drama and violence of 2025, including the tragedy of Charlie Kirk's death, have only reinforced the movement's cohesion. It's accelerated its transition from an insurgency into a fully institutionalized governing philosophy.
So here's a final provocative thought for you to mull over as you process all of this. Whether this new national conservative governing philosophy focused on using aggressive state power to achieve cultural goals can ultimately overcome the practical economic challenges, specifically inflation and the cost of living, that its working class base explicitly demands. That will determine its ultimate political viability heading into the 2026 midterm cycle. Until next time, keep digging.